Right. It is September 22nd, the end of the week. It is Sunday. I have my neuro coffee, if you will. It is Sunday morning, so this is the weekly Q&A and a little bit of an update on things. Lots of cool stuff to talk about. Yesterday was Batman Day, very exciting. Bat signals all over the world going up, so that was kind of cool. I got my Gotham City University shirt on this morning to celebrate a little bit of leftovers. Yesterday we did the pain-free powerlifting seminar. That was really cool. Had a great showing. We got a lot of questions answered. A lot of light bulbs going off for a lot of people. We showed how people can change just doing simple exercises in the gym to supplement what they're already doing from a powerlifting standpoint to offset the secondary consequences, the negative consequences of performing powerlifting activities. So hopefully that was helpful for a lot of people. There'll be segments of that will be coming up on social media and YouTube as well as I go through and edit it. We did about 4 hours and some change on that. So there's a lot of stuff, but I'll try to clean it up a little bit for you so it makes it interesting and useful. So be looking for that. We got some winners. So last week I mentioned giving away two of Mike Robertson's certified coaching programs, and so that goes to Matt Stigler and Jason Dormany, who wrote two really good apps. But here's the dealio. So I was also giving away a coaching call with yours truly. Turns out that those also go to Matt Stigler and Jason Dormany. So these guys are going to be beasts by the time we get done with them. So you got Mike's coaching certification course. You've got a consult with me. We'll arrange that. I'll be in touch with you guys directly, probably this week, and we'll get that set up for you. So congratulations to Matt and Jason. All the applications were read blind, so I didn't see whose name, so I just picked the two. It just turned out that these were the two guys that wrote the best application. So it pays to invest a little bit of time and some thought into those things. We also have books going out to a bunch of guys. Brett Bartholomew's Conscious Coaching book will be coming your way probably this week as well. So congratulations to those winners. Another cool announcement. So my buddy Hunter Charneski has left the Freak Factory. He has actually given it away, which I love. He has paid it forward in a major way, and he has shifted business to Phoenix, Arizona. So those of you in Phoenix, you got a monster of a coach. So Hunter is the world's fastest 255-pound human. And you can find him on the internet at Charneski Power, CHARNESKI Power, charneskipower.com. He's an awesome dude, and so get in touch with him. If you're looking for all things speed, he is the man to talk to these days. As he has gone through it himself, he has turned himself into a sprinter. It's been a really, really cool thing to see. With the help of guys like Derek Hansen, and I threw my hat into the ring as well. So a lot of neat things for him. Okay, so we got a bunch of questions to go through. So I'm going to dig in to the Q&A for this week. So we will start with TC Physiotherapy. Hi, Bill. What's your opinion, ideas on training spinal extension? When do you and how do you? So there seems to be this instilled fear now that spinal extension is a bad thing. It's a normal thing. We should all have access to it. Step one under normal circumstances for health purposes is we want to have full adaptability of the spine, because the spine is always moving. Even under load, it's always moving, and it has to remain adaptable. You've got 24 movable segments of the spine, and we want to have access to all of that unless we are willing to sacrifice that for performance. So there are times where we're going to give up things to acquire new things. So you have a finite pool of resources that includes your movement capabilities, and so under some circumstances we're going to give that up intentionally to achieve a level of performance. If we're trying to restore movement, then spinal extension is going to be one of those things that we want to make sure that we have access to. That way we have this full excursion, we have full adaptability. So from a pain or adaptability or a movement standpoint, We always want to make sure that that's maintained. How you train it is going to be dependent on the individual. So in some circumstances, we need to try to eliminate gravity to reacquire this adaptability. So we're going to do things on our back, we're going to do things on our side, we're going to do things in quadruped, in unloaded positions. So there's no right and there's no wrong. It just depends on the individual. If we're talking about training spinal extension under load, then we have some other concerns that we need to be aware of. Taking the constraints to their end range under load can be a concern because over time, obviously, there's a wear and tear possibility. There's a loading issue associated with that may result in pain. So again, we have to look at people as individuals. We can't just say that spinal extension is bad or spinal extension is good. It's going to depend on what the individual's needs are. As far as strategies that you'll utilize to restore spinal extension, you're going to be looking at an exhalation-based strategy. So this would be moving the sacrum towards nutation, lumbar spine towards extension, which is exhalation in regards to the pelvis and the lumbar spine. So regardless of whatever activity that you're going to choose, you're going to use that exhalation-based strategy. If you use the inhalation-based strategy, then you're going to be looking at sacral counternutation and lumbar flexion, which obviously directly opposes the goal. Typical activities that you would associate with lumbar extension would be hip hinge-based activities. We could refer to those. Those would be exhalation-based and geared towards restoring spinal extension, whereas something that's more deep squat driven would again be opposed to that because that's going to drive sacral counternutation. So keep those things in mind as you're trying to restore spinal extension. Second question from Tyler James Wall. What's something you believe but can't prove? So that's a really good question. These open-ended questions are always kind of interesting. I was talking to a mentee this morning about beliefs and how powerful they are. If you believe that you can't achieve something, there's no question that you won't be able to. And belief is required to make a change. So we all have beliefs, but humans tend to make our decisions or establish beliefs based on emotions. And then we rationalize things with logic and reason. So I don't know that I would consider myself having a belief of something that I wouldn't have some sort of foundation or support for. So I don't know that I could provide a very useful answer. I don't want to chase something and just to create a controversy of such, because again, I think we all search for something to support what we believe. There are obviously things that have really bad evidence to support them. I don't know that I'm currently chasing anything that I don't have a tremendous amount of evidence for. I have cognitive biases just like everybody else does, which have been very strong as of late as I have evolved the model that I use for training and rehab. But I try to make an effort to make sure that I do have some evidence to support things. So to single out anything and say, oh, I believe this, but there's nothing to support it, I don't feel like I move in that direction very often. And if I do, I probably don't express it as anything of importance until I do have some evidence. So I appreciate the question. I just don't know that I have a very useful answer for that one. Next question comes from my Russian friend. Once again, can't pronounce your name based on your Instagram handle, but everybody's going to know who you are by now because you're Russian, and we don't get too many Russians on the Instagram. So here's your question. 3, 2, 1. Next question comes from my Russian friend. And once again, your Instagram handle is difficult to pronounce, so I'll just refer to you as my Russian friend if that's okay. His question is, hey Bill, I noticed that a lot of people who sit for a living have a hard time expanding their thorax. From what I understand, the upper body musculature is concentrically oriented. What are some good upper body exercises to build muscle while improving their ability to expand? I hope the question isn't too loaded. So to clarify, when you sit, the abdominal muscles tend to be a little bit more relaxed, so it's easier to expand the abdominal cavity, and so a lot of the volume in the abdomen can move downward and expand. And so as we move air through the thorax, because of gravity and such, it's easier to fill the lower part of the lung. So as we sit, we can become a little bit more compressive in the upper thorax. And so this compression would be provided by a lot of the superficial musculature, so the chest muscles, the upper back muscles and such. And so that would squeeze the thorax and create a higher pressure in the upper thorax, lower pressure in the lower thorax. And so over time, that musculature can actually learn to be more concentrically oriented. And we'll talk about concentric orientation because I think there's another question coming up about that. But if we were to try to build more muscle in the superficial musculature, that would require a very strong concentric strategy as well. And so a lot of the stuff that builds muscle in the upper back and in the chest area would further increase our ability to create a compressive strategy. So I don't know that there's any great muscle building exercises that wouldn't promote the compressive strategy and would allow us to expand. What we can do is modify a number of exercises. So unilateral pressing, unilateral pulling would certainly create a compressive strategy, but because it's unilateral, we would allow expansion to occur in other areas through the thorax. So that would be the strategy that I would recommend, is that you perform a few more unilateral exercises versus the like a bilateral symmetrical press or bilateral symmetrical pull of any kind. Those strategies would actually increase our ability to compress, whereas when we do it unilateral, we actually allow one side of the thorax to expand. Now, those aren't going to be the best muscle building choices because there is a reduction in force production, because there's a reduction in intensity capabilities. So again, there's a little bit of give and take here where we're trying to create two things that are probably in opposition to each other. So the more muscle I want to build, the stronger my compressive strategy needs to be. And so again, you're just going to have to make those choices when you're deciding whether do I want to build the maximum amount of muscle, or do I just want to train muscle, maybe maintain, maybe make some gains, but I still want to maintain my ability to expand my thorax from a health perspective. And so again, once you'll have to make those decisions for yourself. Our next question comes from, looks like Andrew. What's a good reference or book to study fluid dynamics or embryology? So books for embryology, I use two biggies. One is the classic Gray's Anatomy. It's a monster of a book. It's about 1,400 pages or so and about yay thick. But the embryological section in that is outstanding. I would also recommend, it's over here on the shelf, Larson's Human Embryology, also a great reference text for those things. As far as fluid dynamics, that's just simple physics. I don't know if it's simple physics or not. I try to keep it simple. I don't worry too much about the math part as much as I do understanding the principles behind it. So fluid dynamics, so hydrodynamics, hydrostatics, that's physics. And so you can get that from a simple physics book. There are a number of college level courses that are free online now. So just taking one of those courses and working your way through it does wonders for your understanding of fluid dynamics. So those would be the resources that I would recommend for that. All right, our next question. And this is from, appears to be Randy Peterson. Thoughts on the influence of electrons and voltage on cellular processes, cellular regeneration and healing. Essentially the Dr. Jerry Tennant model of healing. If you are familiar with this content, I am aware of who he is. I don't follow his content much at all. I think I've actually received his book. I can't remember the title of it, but I did receive his book as a gift, and I kind of flipped through it, and it seemed to be a very n=1 kind of a thing. Here's what I would say in regards to that. We are battery powered. All of our cellular processes work on exchanging pluses and minuses. So again, our every cell works like a battery by moving those. We produce energy by moving positive and negative charges. And so again, there is that element to it as far as us being electric. We produce electromagnetic fields. Every organ in your body produces an electromagnetic field. That's why we can measure things like the brain activity and heart activity externally, because we do produce these things. So there is an element of this that probably has to do with how every process in our body works. And so can we influence that? Probably so. Do we really know how to do it well? Probably not. And so what I would think is that when we talk about creating these cascades of events that provide us with these elements of health, things like early morning sun exposure where we have low UVA and high infrared probably is beneficial. Contact with the earth through bare feet probably has an element of that. How much? Who knows? We just really don't know these things. So again, we probably just need to look at the big rocks of health. Make sure you're getting enough sleep. Make sure you exercise. Make sure you're managing blood sugar. And then all of these other little things probably influence us favorably to a certain extent. But as far as having an element of absolute influence in determining what is the optimal dosage of anything, I don't know that we have those capabilities. I don't spend a lot of time studying it either. I'm just aware of it, and I use the elements of it that make sense to me and are coherent with the model that I use. So I won't say that it's all BS, but I would just say that we probably don't have enough understanding to make absolute decisions and dosages and such, but elements of that certainly do appear to be healthful. Next question comes from Find Your Fit Road. You referenced being concentrically oriented or eccentrically oriented. Curious about where I can read up on this idea and give it context. So this is a term that I've used because I like the fact that it is a better descriptor of what we're observing. At least in my opinion, it's a better descriptor of what we're observing. Concentric orientation would imply that a muscle is positioned by the position of the skeleton or the shape of the skeleton, where the muscle would be in a more active position that would be more contracted than, say, some imaginary midline capability of that muscle. So if a muscle has a full excursion, a concentrically oriented muscle would be positioned in a more shortened position, and that could be because of respiration, repetitive exposure to certain activities, rest positions, etc. The nervous system obviously is an influence there as far as how much muscle activity there may be. An eccentrically oriented muscle would be a muscle that is positioned longer than the theoretical mid-range of that muscle's capabilities, and it could still be contracting. So I just think it's a better representation than to say that it is a concentric contraction or an eccentric contraction, because I could have a muscle that is eccentrically oriented, so it's positioned at length and trying to produce an overcoming contraction. So that would be a concentric contraction, but it is in a lengthened position, so it's eccentrically oriented. So muscles are always trying to produce tension. There's tension in the system at all times. And so, again, I just think it's a better descriptor. I don't know if there's any other resource other than what I've been discussing and teaching that would use those terms. But just taking a look at the literature and identifying how a muscle actually behaves may provide you an element of context. From Saw Everything, I'm reading Nature Fix by Florence Williams. It shows the difference in our reactions to urban versus natural environments. Thoughts on overstimulation in daily life. Have noise, pollution, and daily attention demands outgrown our ability to cope? Well, I have not read this book, so I can't speak intelligently about that. I do think there's a lot of stimulation, but there's always a lot of stimulation. We get to decide what that is. And so when we talk about noise pollution or daily attention demands, you get to make those decisions. Our daily habits, our exposure to social media, small screens, etc., probably do drain us of resources. We have a finite level of resources that we have to distribute to all things. And so if we spend a lot of time doing the things that are demanding of our attention, and we learn over time, and we continue to perform these habits that interfere and absorb these resources, then certainly we can reduce our ability to cope with other stressors. But once again, we get to make those decisions. A lot of these things are not have-tos, they're choices to do. And so I think you just have to make that decision. We can always shut down. We just have to make that decision, and we have to be a little bit more mature about some of the decisions that we make and not default into these things. Things seem to have to move quickly, but we always have that choice. And I think that's what it comes down to more than anything else. I don't think we're being forced to. I don't think we lose our ability to cope, but we may be giving up our ability to cope. And so I would take that into consideration. So the next question comes from Sean Hausman. He wrote a really, really long question explanation there. If you want to, you can go to the Q&A on Instagram. But basically what Sean's asking me is, are we inherently built to be posteriorly tilted? And I would say probably not. Having evolved from quadrupedal ancestors, I don't think that we were designed to be posteriorly tilted. We are more posteriorly tilted than the quadrupeds, obviously. Their pelvic shape and orientation is radically different from ours. Ours is more round than theirs is. So if we look at quadrupedal apes, their pelvises tend to be very, very flat. They would be more frontal plane oriented, where our pelvis is a little bit more round. This allows us to orient the hip into a certain way. And then the spine makes an adjustment in its curvatures to make sure that the torso is centered over the pelvis. And so that's why a lot of those adaptations have occurred. So we get wedge-shaped vertebrae, which help us maintain those curves. And once again, it helps us reduce energy as well. So it's only about 7% more energy output to stand upright with the thorax positioned over the pelvis than it is to lay down. So we're always about efficiency and reducing energy expenditure. I would think that the pelvis would have to increase its roundness to an even greater degree to get us to be more posteriorly tilted. It would also alter the mechanics of the posterior hip in regards to the way that the posterior hip musculature attaches to the pelvis and maintains its for lack of a better explanation, leverages to allow us to do the things that we do. The pelvic axis would have to change, and that would certainly alter our ability to walk. And so I don't think that we were inherently designed to be posteriorly tilted. I think under certain circumstances that we will require more posterior tilt. So for instance, in certain types of squatting, in certain lifts, we would be more posteriorly tilted because we have to manage pressures and volumes as such to maintain our center of gravity over our feet. And that's a big element of why the pelvis does what it does. Ultimately, from stance and bipedal gait, we have to be able to control our center of gravity over our base of support. So I don't think that we were designed to be posteriorly tilted. I just think that it's an easier default to move towards the anterior tilt based on our design, based on where we came from. And so that's probably why we see this lack of control in regards to managing the anterior-posterior orientation of the pelvis. My buddy Ray McKenna Fitness, there you go, Ray McKenna. What's my opinion on stretching? I think if you like to stretch, I think you should go ahead and do it. I don't think it does a whole lot. What I would caution people against is trying to utilize focal stretches, as we would say traditionally, where you would put a muscle on length and hold it for some sort of duration. Once again, not a whole lot happens there. There's a potential change in your pain tolerance, so that might allow you to access a little bit more range of motion. As far as actually changing the tissue, minimal changes at all in that regard. That's why I'm not so worried about it. I think that the reason that people gain range of motion significantly when they do perform stretching has a whole lot to do with the interaction of the nervous system, respiration, expansion, and compression of fluid, more so than actually changing lengths of tissues. So I think that if you like to stretch, you go ahead. If you don't, I don't think it has a huge impact on it. Doesn't mean you shouldn't move through a full excursion of your range of motion, but to try to acquire a change to address some sort of mechanical element or or reduce pain to make some sort of change, or to think that you're altering some sort of muscle balance around a joint by stretching. I don't think there's a whole lot of good things going on there, or things that will influence long-term change. So that would be my opinion. If you like it, do it. It does feel good, but again, I think there's a lot of other things that are going on there when we do make a favorable change associated with what we would typically refer to as a static stretch. So we have to consider all of those things when we're talking about stretching. Our last question comes from I am Evan Marcantonio. Can you explain your logo, please? I'm assuming you're talking about the 16% logo. I've got a lot of questions about that. Who are these people and such? And my philosophical answer is it doesn't really matter how I arrived at the number. What you need to understand is there's a certain percentage of the population that will find the message that I'm providing, the information that I'm providing, useful and valuable. And so I'm only talking to those people. I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. What I am is trying to provide information, give permission, allow people to evolve and develop their own way. And that's going to be this 16% that I'm talking to. So that would be the best way for me to express that, because again, how I arrived at that wouldn't be meaningful to anyone else. And once again, I just hope that what I'm doing is helpful for someone. And if it's not, then so be it. But I will continue to produce content and provide information to the best of my ability. And if people find it valuable, then I appreciate that a great deal. And again, I'm thankful that they're there, and I'm glad I can help someone. So that's the goal. That's the 16% for now, until otherwise explained. Once again, hopefully you're part of that population. If you aren't, then that's okay too. You can find your information elsewhere, and you'll find value elsewhere, and I'm okay with that. Okay, so that ends this week's Q&A. Hope it was helpful. Hope it was useful. Now, I'm going to try a little experiment here. I'm going to give you guys an opportunity to ask me more questions. So I have created an email address to allow you to do so. That email address is askbillhartman@gmail.com. askbillhartman@gmail.com. Here's the stipulation. In the subject line, I want you to write Ask Bill Hartman Questions. If I don't see that in the subject line, I will immediately delete the email. So we're going to give this a shot. I want to help as many people as I possibly can. If you send me a question, expect it to be put up somewhere on social media or on YouTube if it's useful and helpful for others. So keep that in mind when you're asking the question. As always, you can find me on Instagram, Bill Hartman PT. You can also find me on Facebook, Bill Hartman PT. So a lot of stuff coming down the pipe, so to speak, as far as social media goes. I'll be posting up some of the clips from the Pain-Free Powerlifting Seminar. So make sure you're staying tuned, as they say, and pay attention. So I'll see you next week.